The colony of HFY was not a peaceful place. The planet's sky always glowed with a strange green haze, and its twin moons hung low like watchful eyes. The air was thick, the ground was red, and the forests were full of things that clicked and hissed when you passed by. Humans had built their small colony there just 3 years ago, a collection of metal shelters, solar farms, and defense turrets. It wasn't much, but it was home for the hundreds of people trying to prove that humanity could survive anywhere. Among them was Corporal Mara Ellis, an engineer, a fighter, and a woman who never knew when to quit. She had fixed broken oxygen filters on moons, built shelters during dust storms, and once patched a shuttle hull with duct tape and a prayer. She wasn't special. At least that's what she told herself. But she knew how to survive. When the colony's computer system crashed during a recent storm, the administration scrambled to reassign living quarters. That was how Mara ended up staring at the message blinking on her datapad. New roommate assigned, Karath son of Vor, alien warrior, Tyrax Alliance exchange program. Mara squinted. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Karath was not human. He was a Tyraxian, one of the massive, scale-skinned warriors who had once ruled this part of the galaxy before their empire fell centuries ago. They were taller, stronger, and far too serious for her liking. Most humans avoided them, mostly because of their bad tempers and their habit of sharpening their weapons during lunch breaks. When she opened the door to her new quarters, she almost turned around. Karath was there, huge, armored, and standing like a statue in the middle of the room. His scales were dark bronze, his eyes bright amber. He wore no helmet, just a long scar running across one cheek. His voice rumbled like a quiet thunderstorm when he spoke. "You are the human engineer," he said. "You are small." Mara crossed her arms. "And you're huge." "Great observation. Guess we're both good at introductions." He blinked once, then said, "I do not share food. Or weapons." "Good," she replied. "I don't share patience." The silence that followed could have frozen lava. Their first week together was chaos. Karath rose at dawn, trained with his heavy sword in the narrow courtyard, and recited what sounded like battle chants that made the walls shake. Mara, on the other hand, worked late into the night fixing generators and arguing with the colony's AI about missing power cells. When she tried to cook breakfast, Karath claimed her food smelled like poison. When he sharpened his blade in the kitchen, she told him he was one spark away from starting a fire. But something strange happened after a few days. When the air filters in their room failed, Karath silently lifted the heavy panels for her to reach. When one of his armor straps broke, Mara repaired it with metal clamps and a grin. "Don't tell anyone," she said, "or they'll think I actually like you." He tilted his head, confused. "You do not?" she sighed. "You're growing on me, like mold." For the first time, he almost smiled, or maybe that was just his version of a smile. One evening, the colony alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the halls, and the loudspeakers shouted the words no one wanted to hear. "Incoming vessels. Possible hostile raiders. All defense teams to stations." Mara dropped her tools and ran to the defense command. Karath followed, his armor gleaming under the emergency lights. Outside, the sky above HFY burned with streaks of blue fire, enemy ships entering the atmosphere. The raiders were known for attacking new colonies, taking what they wanted and leaving nothing behind. "Mara," her captain shouted, "we need the East Perimeter shield back online. You're the only one who knows that system." "I'm on it," she said, already running. Karath followed without being ordered. "You will need protection," he said. "I'll be fine," she snapped. He looked at her calmly. "You are small," she sighed. "Fine, but stay out of my way." The East Shield generator was half buried under a collapsed tower. Mara climbed through the wreckage, coughing from the smoke, trying to reconnect the power conduits. Karath stood above her, deflecting falling debris with his sword. When a raider drone swooped down, firing plasma bolts, he moved faster than she thought possible, slicing the machine clean in half. "Remind me to stay on your good side," Mara said. "Still working." "You have not yet seen my bad side," Karath replied. "Can't wait," she muttered. After several tense minutes, the generator roared to life. Blue energy rippled across the colony walls, and the shield was up. Cheers erupted from the command center over the comms. But the battle wasn't over yet. A massive explosion rocked the ground nearby. The main reactor had taken a hit. Without it, the shields would fail within minutes. Mara and Karath sprinted toward the reactor dome. Smoke and sparks filled the corridors. People were shouting, dragging wounded crew out of the way. Inside, the control chamber glowed red with warning lights. "I can fix it," Mara said, dropping to her knees beside the console. "But I need time." Karath stood in front of the main doors, gripping his sword. "Then time you shall have." The first raiders broke through moments later, tall insectoid creatures with bladed limbs. Karath charged. His sword met their weapons in flashes of light. Each swing was powerful, deliberate, brutal. He fought like he was born for this, maybe he was. Mara's hands flew across the console, rerouting energy and sealing plasma leaks. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Sparks burned her gloves. Almost there," she muttered. A raider drone slipped through the ceiling vent, aiming its gun at her back. Karath roared, leapt, and threw his blade. It pierced the drone midair, splitting it apart before it could fire. When he landed beside her, she stared up at him in shock. You just saved me." He looked down at her, calm as ever. "You fixed the shield. You saved all of us." "Yeah, well," she said, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Guess we're even." When the battle finally ended, the raiders retreated. The shield held. The colony survived. The next morning, as the sun rose over the red plains, Mara and Karath stood outside their quarters. The air smelled like metal and victory. Workers were already repairing the damaged towers. "You fought well," Karath said. "For a human," she smirked. "You weren't bad yourself. For an overgrown lizard." He tilted his head again, that almost smile flickering across his face. "Perhaps this arrangement will work after all." Mara laughed. "Don't get too comfortable." "I still snore." "I have heard worse," he said. "Yeah?" she asked. "Like what?" He looked out toward the horizon, where the wreckage of the enemy ships lay smoking. "The screams of my enemies." Mara blinked, then chuckled. "You're joking, right?" He didn't answer. For a moment, she wasn't sure if he even knew what a joke was. But as they walked back into their quarters, something had changed. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was comfortable, the kind of quiet you share with someone who's got your back. And somewhere deep down, Mara realized that moving in with an alien warrior might not be the worst thing that ever happened to her. Life after the raid was not easy, but it was louder. The colony of Tyrax 4 was still recovering. Burnt towers, cracked walls, and twisted metal covered the edge of the settlement like scars. People moved everywhere, repairing power lines, welding shield plates, cleaning smoke from the air vents. The raiders had hurt them, but they hadn't broken them. Mara Ellis walked through the camp with a toolbox hanging from her belt and a datapad in her hand. The sun was hot, the air dry, and her hair was tied in a messy knot. She didn't have time to rest. The East Defense Tower still needed power, the oxygen filters were acting up again, and someone had stolen her best wrench. She grumbled under her breath. But a small part of her felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. She and Karath had helped save the colony. For once, people didn't just see her as the engineer who fixes stuff. They saw her as someone who stood her ground. Karath was another. Story, the alien warrior, had become something like a silent storm that walked among humans. He didn't talk much, but he trained with the defense teams every morning, his bronze-scaled armor shining in the sun. People who once avoided him now greeted him with cautious respect. Some were even brave enough to ask for fighting tips. He still didn't smile, but there was a new calm in his eyes. Every night when Mara came home covered in grease, she found him sharpening his sword or cleaning his armor. And every night, they argued about something, kitchen space, noise, or his weird habit of hanging his armor in the living room. "You can't just hang your giant chest plate next to the heater," she said one night. "It must remain warm," he replied calmly. "Cold metal weakens the spirit." "It's metal, not a living thing." Karath gave her a look. "Everything has a spirit," she groaned. "You're impossible." He tilted his head. "So are you, but things weren't normal. Far from it." 2 weeks after the raid, a patrol ship detected a signal deep in orbit, a signal that matched the raider frequency, only this time it was much stronger. Inside the main command center, Captain Reese stood over a holographic display. Mara leaned on the console, her face pale with exhaustion. Karath stood behind her like a quiet wall. "It's not just raiders," Reese said, pointing at the map. "It's a fleet." "How big?" Mara asked. Big enough to burn this colony to the ground. The room went silent. No one had expected another attack so soon. The colony was still patching holes from the first raid. Their defenses were weak. The shield generator could handle one ship, maybe two, not a fleet. What do we do? Someone whispered. Karath stepped forward. We fight. Mara turned her head. You're serious? Always. We don't have enough soldiers, Reese said. Not enough ships. Not enough anything. Mara crossed her arms. Then we make enough. The captain gave her a tired look. With what? Scrap metal and duct tape? Mara smirked. Exactly. The next few days were chaos, but a different kind of chaos. The kind that smelled like fire, metal, and determination. Mara gathered every engineer, mechanic, and stubborn soul she could find. Karath brought his warrior discipline. Together they began turning the colony into a fortress. Old mining lasers were converted into turret cannons. Cargo drones were rebuilt into flying traps with magnetized nets. Steel containers became bunkers. Even farming irrigation pipes were turned into flamethrowers. Karath trained the volunteers in close combat. His voice echoed across the training yard. Strength is not in your arms, he said, demonstrating a blade movement. It is in your will. Stand, fight, do not break. Humans struggled at first. They were smaller and slower than Taraxians. But what they lacked in size, they made up for in imagination. One young colonist welded a shield that could reflect plasma fire. Another created bombs out of old power cells. Karath watched their clever tricks with a raised brow. You fight with fire and metal, he said to Mara one evening. She wiped sweat off her forehead. We fight with whatever works. Karath nodded slowly. That is wise. Wow, Mara said with a grin. Did you just say something nice? He stared at her. I said something true, she laughed. It was short, tired, but real. Their bond deepened, though neither of them said it out loud. At night, while the rest of the colony slept, Mara sat on the roof fixing turrets while Karath polished his blade beside her. Sometimes they talked about the past. She told him about growing up in a mining colony on Earth's moon, where she learned to fix machines before she could read. He told her about his warrior clan, how they once ruled the stars but lost everything in a great war. Why did your people join the Human Alliance? Mara asked. Karath stared at the night sky. Because we were broken. Humans are not broken yet. Mara raised a brow. Not yet? He looked at her. You break everything else before you break yourselves. She didn't know whether that was an insult or a compliment, but it made her smile anyway. The fleet arrived at dawn. The sky turned black with ships. Sleek raider vessels with jagged wings and red lights swarmed above the atmosphere. The ground shook as the colony prepared. The alarm blared. People ran to their stations. The air crackled with tension. Mara stood on the command platform, wearing a patched combat vest and holding a datapad connected to the turret network. Karath stood beside her, sword drawn, his bronze armor gleaming like fire. You ready for this? Mara asked. I was born ready, he replied. Of course you were. The first wave hit the outer shield. Plasma bolts rained down like burning comets. Mara's team triggered the modified mining lasers. Blue beams of energy shot up, tearing through the sky. Several raider drones exploded in showers of sparks. Karath led a squad on the ground. The raiders landed at the east gate expecting an easy fight. They were wrong. Traps hidden under the sand blew their legs out. Nets wrapped around their wings. Humans with makeshift weapons swarmed them, yelling battle cries. Karath cut through their front line like a storm, his sword moving with brutal grace. Push them back, someone shouted. Hold the line! Karath roared, his deep voice echoing like thunder. Inside the command tower, Mara's fingers flew across the controls. One by one, she rerouted power from life support systems to the turrets. It was risky. If the battle lasted too long, oxygen would run low. But she didn't care. They had one chance. An explosion rocked the room. A plasma bolt had hit one of the shield generators. Sparks flew, alarms screamed, and part of the defense grid went dark. Mara, Captain Reese shouted. Can you fix it? She grabbed her wrench. On it, outside, the battlefield burned. Karath saw her running toward the broken generator and moved to cover her. Stay behind me, he said. Not a chance, she replied. They reached the generator, half buried in rubble just like last time. But this time the enemy was stronger. Mara crawled under the twisted pipes, trying to repair the damage while Karath blocked plasma fire with his blade. A raider warrior twice Mara's size jumped down, aiming for her back. Karath turned just in time. grabbing the creature and slamming it into the dirt. The ground shook. Mara reconnected the last conduit, sparks flying inches from her face. "Come on, come on!" The generator roared back to life. A blue wave of energy washed over the battlefield. The shield was up again. The raiders hesitated. For the first time, they realized the humans weren't breaking. "They fear us," Karath said quietly. Mara grinned. Good. Hours passed. The colony fought like a cornered beast. Every trap, every weapon, every trick they had built came alive on the battlefield. Humans used speed and brains. Karath and his warriors used raw power. Together, they turned the tide. When the enemy finally broke formation and fled into the sky, the battlefield was covered in smoke and glowing debris. The humans had won again, against impossible odds. Mara dropped to the ground exhausted, her clothes soaked in sweat and dirt. Karath stood beside her, breathing heavily but standing tall. She looked up at him and said, "I guess we make a pretty good team." He nodded. "You fight like a warrior," she smirked. "And you think like an engineer now." For a moment, the warrior actually smiled. Not almost. A real small smile. That night, the colony celebrated. Lights glowed. Music played. People danced even though they were bruised and tired. Mara and Karath sat on the steps outside their shared quarters, watching everyone laugh. For the first time, the space between them wasn't filled with sharp words or silence. It was warm. "You know," Mara said, "when I got assigned to live with you, I thought it was the worst day of my life. And now?" he asked. She looked at the stars. "Now I think it might have been the best." Karath didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes, glowing softly in the starlight, said everything. The colony of Tyrax 4 was quiet again. Too quiet. The ground was still black from the last battle. The defense towers still carried burn marks. And even though the raider fleet had fled, everyone knew it was not over. Raiders did not run forever. They returned, bigger, stronger, angrier. Mara Ellis sat on the roof of the command tower with her legs hanging over the edge, looking at the stars. The night sky was clear, the twin moons shining bright. But she didn't feel peaceful. She felt like the stars were watching. And waiting. Karath stood behind her, silent as always. His armor glowed softly in the moonlight. He didn't need to say anything. She already knew what he was thinking. "They'll come back," Mara said quietly. "Yes," Karath answered. "And this time, it won't be just raiders." He nodded once. "A full war fleet." Mara let out a slow breath. She wasn't scared, not exactly. But a heavy feeling grew in her chest. This wasn't going to be another quick fight. This was going to be the fight that decided everything. The warning came 2 nights later. A loud siren echoed across the colony. Red lights flashed through every street. Mara jumped off the roof and ran with Karath to the command center. Captain Reese stood over the holomap again, his face pale. "Long-range scanners picked up a massive fleet," he said. "Dozens of ships. They're not raiders anymore. They're warlords." Mara clenched her fists. "How long do we have?" 2 days. Maybe less. The room filled with heavy silence. Everyone understood. There would be no reinforcements from Earth. No one else would help. Tyrax 4 was too far, too small, too forgotten. Karath stepped forward. "Then we fight." Mara gave a short laugh. "Of course you'd say that. It is the only way," he replied. But this time Mara didn't argue. She looked around at the tired faces in the room. Soldiers, engineers, farmers, mechanics. All of them had survived 2 battles already. All of them were still standing. "We're going to make them regret coming here," Mara said firmly. "We'll build something they'll never forget." The next 48 hours became a blur of sound and fire. The humans built. The Tyraxians sharpened their blades. Every scrap of metal, every working machine, every piece of tech went into the final defense. Mara rewired the shield generators to create overlapping layers. Karath led his warriors to set up new defense lines. The engineers dug deep tunnels beneath the colony and filled them with hidden charges. Drones flew through the air like fireflies, carrying supplies and tools. No one slept. No one complained. At night, Mara and Karath sat together, leaning against the wall of their shared quarters. The air was cool, the wind soft, but the tension in the air was sharp. "Do you fear death?" Karath asked suddenly. Mara blinked. "That's a little heavy, don't you think?" He didn't smile. "Answer." She looked at the stars. "I don't fear death. I fear dying for nothing." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then we must make this count. She turned to him. His golden eyes burned like fire. In that moment, she understood. He wasn't just fighting for honor. He was fighting for her, for this colony, for everything they had built together. The enemy fleet arrived at dawn. Dark ships filled the sky like a storm. Their lights glowed red, casting shadows across the colony. The ground rumbled as their engines roared. It was a sight that made even the bravest hearts beat faster. Mara stood on the front wall of the colony with a communicator in her ear and a tool belt on her hip. Karath stood next to her in full battle armor, sword in hand. Around them, hundreds of humans and Taraxians stood shoulder to shoulder. The warlord ship sent out a message. "Surrender and we will let some of you live." Mara snorted. "Typical," Karath growled. "We do not surrender." She lifted the colony's comm link and sent her own message back. "Come and try." The battle began like a hammer falling. Enemy ships fired plasma rounds from orbit. The shield flared bright blue as it held against the first wave. Mara shouted into her comm, giving orders to redirect power between shield sectors. Engineers ran like lightning between towers. Karath and the warriors waited at the main gate. They didn't move when the first enemy dropship slammed into the ground. They stood like stone. "Now," Mara yelled. The hidden charges under the landing zones exploded. Fire lit up the morning sky. Enemy troops stumbled into the colony under a rain of smoke and metal. Human turrets fired. Drones dropped nets and small bombs. The enemy expected weak farmers. What they got was a fortress built by desperate, clever hands. Karath roared and charged into the fray. His sword moved like a burning line through the chaos. He blocked plasma bolts with his shield and cut down raiders with terrifying grace. Mara stayed in the command post, controlling the defense systems. But she wasn't safe. Enemy drones flew overhead, targeting the control tower. She grabbed a rifle, an old one, and shot down 2 of them herself. Her heart raced, but she didn't stop. "Turret line 3, redirect power," she shouted. "North gate, watch your flank." Hours passed like minutes. The enemy kept coming, wave after wave. The colony fought like a cornered animal. Mara's voice grew hoarse. Her hands burned from hot wires, but she never left her post. At the gate, Karath stood at the center of the fight. His armor was scratched, cracked, smoking, but he didn't fall. He fought beside humans who had never held a sword before this day, and he roared with pride every time they pushed the enemy back. Then a massive shadow fell over the colony. The enemy flagship had entered the atmosphere. "Mara," Captain Reese yelled. "That ship is too close and it'll blast us apart." Mara looked at the map. They couldn't shoot it down with turrets. They didn't have enough firepower, but they did have something else. An idea. A dangerous one. She ran out of the tower, grabbed a jetpack from the supply crate, and sprinted toward the east platform. Karath saw her and blocked 2 enemy soldiers before catching up. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to fly up there and blow it from the inside." "That is foolish." "Yeah," she said with a grin. "That's why it might work." Karath grabbed her arm. "You will not survive alone." She met his eyes. "Then come with me." For the first time since they met, Karath didn't argue. The 2 of them blasted into the sky through smoke and fire. Plasma bolts chased them, but Mara twisted and dove, her fingers tight on the flight controls. Karath followed, using his strength and his blade to deflect incoming fire. They landed on the hull of the warlord flagship with a loud metallic thud. Enemy soldiers poured out of hatches. Karath met them with his sword. Mara crawled toward the engine access panel, hacking through locks with shaking fingers. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. The warlords didn't expect humans to fight like this. Karath cut down the last of the guards and stood beside her. "Hurry, I'm trying," she hissed, pulling out wires. "This ship's reactor is huge," he looked around. "If we destroy it, we destroy ourselves too." Mara's hand stilled. "I know." He placed one clawed hand on her shoulder. "Then we will fall together." She looked at him, really looked. The alien warrior who once called her small, the warrior who now stood beside her without question. She smiled. "Not today." She reprogrammed the engine's coolant system, setting a chain reaction that would overload the reactor in 10 minutes. Then she linked the detonation signal to her communicator. "Time to go," she said. They jumped off the ship and ignited their packs, flying back down as the warlord flagship began to shake. Plasma fire chased them all the way back to the ground. The moment they landed inside the colony walls, Mara pressed the detonator. The sky turned white. A huge fireball bloomed as the flagship exploded in midair. Enemy soldiers screamed, ships broke formation, and the warlords, who once thought themselves unstoppable, turned and fled. Cheers erupted through the colony. "We did it," someone shouted. Mara fell to her knees, laughing and crying at the same time. Karath landed beside her, smoke rising from his armor, a rare and small smile on his face. "You are insane," he said. "Yeah," she panted, "but it worked." That night the stars were clear again, no enemy ships, no sirens, no fear. The colony had survived the impossible. Word would spread through the galaxy, not of a warlord's victory, but of humans and Taraxians who stood together and won. Mara sat outside their quarters, wrapped in a blanket. Karath sat next to her, sword resting on the ground. "You know," she said softly, "when I first met you, I thought you were a pain." "You were not wrong," she laughed. "But now, I think I'd rather fight the galaxy with you than live alone." He turned his head slightly. "You are small, but your spirit is large," she smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment," he nodded. "It is." They sat there in silence, side by side, watching the twin moons rise. Two warriors. Two different worlds, one home. And somewhere out there, the galaxy began to whisper about the human engineer and the alien warrior who stood against a fleet and did not break.